requires this idea of contextual intelligence, which is, again, diagnosing your environment in real time and then responding appropriately to what it is that you're seeing.
Hello there. This is John Bernatovicz, your host of the HR Like a Boss podcast. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share with a friend. I've embarked on a journey to get to know amazingly awesome HR and business professionals, and I'm trying to understand what it takes to do HR like a boss. On today's episode, I am super excited to be joined by Matt Kutz. Matt is a contact that I made through our sponsorship of Disrupt HR Columbus. And I'm super excited to have him on. And you can tell if you're watching, he's a huge Buckeyes fan. OH.
IO.
Welcome to the show, Matt.
Hey, excited to be here. Thanks a bunch, man. I really appreciate it.
When we first connected, you told me about the book you've written and this concept of contextual intelligence. And I may not have even pronounced it properly. I know it's a newer term and something you're trying to bring to the world. And I'm just curious if you can, for me and our listeners, simplify that idea down to layman's terms. And what does that mean?
What I mean by it when I use the term contextual intelligence, it's basically context. So we understand what context is, right? The background event or situations that we're involved in. And if you look at the history of the word context, it's actually rooted in a Latin word, contexture, which is related to the concept of textiles or fabrics. So it really was used, the first time the word context was used, it was used to describe the process of all the different fabrics and textures of fabrics that made a tapestry. So when you think about context in that sense, it's actually quite profound and interesting. Is context is all the different colors, all the different textures of a fabric that go to create a picture. So in a business organization or in a corporate sense, context is the stories and the history that we all bring as individuals, the unique experiences that we have that we bring to the organization that create a unique picture that we're looking at, a unique organization. Then you throw in the concept of intelligence in there. And what I mean by intelligence is completely different than what most of the world means by intelligence. When most of the world talks about intelligence, they're referring to things like your IQ, your grade point average, your GPA in college, or your explicit knowledge, this intellectual capacity. That's not what intelligence is. If you really explore what intelligence is all about and the outcomes of intelligence, it's really about being able to contribute in an environment meaningfully and with the shortest learning curve possible. So combining those two concepts, contextual intelligence is about understanding and looking at the environment, being aware of all the different pieces that are contributing to the situation you're currently engaged in, and then being able to respond quickly and appropriately in that context. So that's kind of the nutshell. The neat thing about context is that it's changing all the time. So for example, a new person enters the conversation, an old familiar person exits the conversation. The context is constantly shifting because it's dependent on the human interaction. Context is never static. And we as practitioners, we as clinicians, we as business people, executives, HR practitioners have this default where we're trying to simplify how we interact with the world. And one of the things that we do by naturally to simplify what we're seeing is we try to filter out all the bias. We try to filter out all the different inputs. We try to make everybody fit a standard mold or a same mold, and we're really ignoring context. So talking about disrupting this HR, talking about flipping this idea of performance and leadership in a different way, it requires this idea of contextual intelligence, which is, again, diagnosing your environment in real time and then responding appropriately to what it is that you're seeing.
Tell me your thoughts on how what your research is showing can help an individual navigate through a tough conversation.
Yeah, that's a great question because there are some very tangible things that can be done. One of the things that I think helps more with any conversation, especially the crucial ones that need to happen, is what I call this notion of 3D thinking. And if we can learn to practice 3D thinking and have it as part of our thought process, it dramatically impacts the quality of the conversations we have with people and how they walk away feeling not like they've just been rebuked or they've just been chastised, or they actually feel like, oh my goodness, this person's actually on my side. And so what 3D thinking is, it's the appropriate application of the three dimensions of time in how we frame our ideas in our conversations. And basically it's past, present, and future. And in the book, I call it hindsight, insight, and foresight. Basically what that means is this: if you study most people's responses and how most people will evaluate an opportunity or a situation that they're in, the default evaluation frame perspective is the past or hindsight. And we typically filter everything we do and say through the filter of hindsight. Okay. 3D thinking is about using the other two dimensions of time equally as much as hindsight. So the other two dimensions would be insight, which is the present, and foresight, which is the future. And so what we need to do is equally distribute the mental time we spend in each of those three time orientations. So when you're interacting with someone, it's not only talking about or rehearsing what happened in the past, it's all and why that happened. Of course, there's a lot of depth to this. Not just the past and why what happened and how it happened, but also, well, what does that mean for the present and what's happening in the present? Because what happened then is can only be effective if we understand what's happening right now. And so much of the time we neglect that, the reality of the present moment. And then in addition to that, there's not only the reality of the present moment, but there's what I call our aspirational identity, or the person or organization that we want to be or need to be, which is foresight driven. So I need to be able to also see all three of those time orientations in the present moment. So I say that there's an equation. It's hindsight plus foresight equals insight. When I have a correct and accurate understanding of the past with an ability to articulate clearly what I want in the future, those two things converge or collide together to give me accurate insight for the moment right now. And I find myself, and literally people have said this to me, I find myself more likely to say the right thing at the right time, instead of having the brilliant idea or the great comeback, as I'm walking away or the next day when I'm rehearsing what happened in my mind. And by learning the skills of converging those three time orientations, we can actually enhance our capacity to have these crucial conversations and meaningful conversations. And by the way, this works more than just HR. I had a guy tell me, and this is the first time I actually realized I had something valuable, it was after a workshop I had just done, and he was actually followed me out to my car, and he found me, he goes, sir, that was my, like you said at the beginning, my mind exploded. But what I realized about halfway through your talk, when you started talking about 3D thinking, is that if I had known that 7 years ago, I wouldn't be divorced right now. And that's a profound, that made me stop. It's like, well, wait, I didn't even see that as relevant or something valuable here. But it goes about crucial conversations. Some of the most crucial conversations we have are with the people who we love, the people around us. And just now imagine that impact and then bring it to work, and how that can actually change the work environment and increase morale so much more when we're vulnerable and transparent with each other to bring in the dimension of 3D thinking.
Tell me what you think it takes, Matt, for someone to do HR like a boss.
HR like a boss. Like I said, it's ultimately about the motivation. The people who do HR like a boss are motivated to get the people around them to perform at a high level, and offers them the resources to actually perform well. And of course, not to reiterate everything I just said, but to be a boss in HR, you've got to have mastered the techniques and skills of contextual intelligence, which includes the things we said: understanding complexity and complication. There's understanding 3D thinking and integrating those concepts into your daily practice, then you're HR like a boss.
Matt, I really appreciate you being on the show. I had a blast and I learned a number of things.
I had a blast too. I really appreciate it, John.
Thank you for checking out the HR Like a Boss podcast. If it resonates with you, please consider leaving a rating and review. And better yet, subscribe and share with a friend. Until next time, let's continue to aspire to do amazingly awesome HR.